1, 99.5 FM in Sukin-Machosen, 90.5 FM in Victoria, and maybe you're somewhere in between, listening from the road this morning on the crawl in from the western communities. In recent days, we've been exploring some of the reasons for the congestion, the roadwork on the Island Highway, the pinch point at the Mackenzie intersection. Causes are easy to find, but solutions less so. Our suggestions keep coming up, though, and one in particular, the feedback from listeners on this one is clear. Get more people out of their cars and reduce the number of single-passenger vehicles on the road. Easier said than done, no doubt, but a UVic project looked at casual carpooling as a setup that has become popular in places as varied as Washington, D.C. and Pender Island, and Shannon Gibson prepared the background guide to casual carpooling for UVic's Environmental Law Clinic, and she joins me right now. Shannon Gibson, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And what is casual carpooling, first of all?
Well, casual carpooling has also been known as instant carpooling or even slugging. And what it is when you have a driver who just picks up someone from the side of the road and forms an instant carpool. So the initial thing that started this phase was in Washington, D.C. is where it began, where they put in place HOV lanes, which required at least 3 passengers.
Okay, so a slug line forms, and this. At first, I was going to say, how's that any different than hitchhiking? But you've got presumably some accepted, even casually accepted points where people can line up and form that slug line.
Yeah, well, in Washington D.C., where it began, it was very impromptu. People would often just pull up to a bus stop and ask people to get into their car so that they could use the HOV lane, and then after a while, a sort of culture just developed where people would just agree on places where they would meet, and after years and years, there was just these agreed upon places where cars would pull up and passengers would get in.
And the HOV lane, although maybe it's not crucial, but it certainly sounds like that would be the huge motivation on the driver's point of view, rather than being selfish and saying, no, I don't want to pick up anyone. Well, they can all of a sudden go into the faster HOV lane if they take on a rider, I guess.
Exactly, and one of the sort of cultures behind this casual carpooling is that there is no exchange of money. So the benefit for the driver is that they are able to use the HOV lane. And the 3 cities in the U.S. where it has been the most popular are Houston, Texas, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. And the 3 commonalities of those places is that they have carpool lanes that require at least 3 passengers. So in places where there are maybe only a 2-passenger requirement,
like Metro Vancouver,
exactly,
for instance.
Yeah. It's easier for people to just have 2 passengers, so there's less of an incentive for them to need to pick up random people off the street to fill their car.
Pardon me if I sound like a nervous Nelly here. What about safety concerns with strangers giving and taking rides?
That's definitely one of the most common concerns that people bring up, but in terms of it's mostly anecdotal evidence, but in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco, I read a number of reports that said there have never been any negative reported incidents of people being injured or kidnapped or any of that kind of terrible stuff. And I guess there's really just sort of a culture of trust around the entire practice, and there are various etiquette rules and safety rules that have sort of developed. One of them is that generally you will always have 3 people in the car, so 2 people will get in the car together.
Okay.
And there's also a rule against leaving a woman alone on the sidewalk. So if there's like 2 men and a woman, then the 1 man would stay behind instead of the woman. So
we're short for time, but I do want to ask you before you go how this worked. To think of somewhere completely different on Pender Island.
Yeah, well, Pender Island has been very successful. They started the program about 2 years ago, and they have now 29 car stops, and they actually have full metal signs with a little sort of poem disclaimer thing, and it's reported on all of the tourism websites, and even Main Island has also implemented a similar program with 25 stops, and there's been a lot of interest on places like Gabriola, Hornby, and even Salt Spring Island.
Well, that's a very interesting idea. Shannon Gibson, good of you to bring it to us this morning. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
Shannon Gibson is an articling law student and the author of Casual Carpooling, a background guide, which was prepared for the UVic Environmental Law Centre Clinic. What do you think about it? Give us a call or send us an email, victoria@cbc.ca, and tell us whether you think it might work on the Colwood